and I am recording. So it is, today is the 21st of December, 2016. My name's Peter Smallage. I'm the New York State Extension Forester and host of the Forest Connect webinar series. And you all are seeing the very first rollout of our newest webinar software system. This is Zoom, and it's my great pleasure to introduce friend and colleague Tom Worthley. Tom is an associate professor of extension forestry from the University of Connecticut. I've known Tom for many, many years, and I was looking about for topics for webinars, and Tom offered up a presentation on small-scale management options for woodland owners. And so, and that's a great topic. So I know that we've had interest in that in the past. And with that, Tom, I'm gonna mute my microphone and turn it over to you and let you go. So thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Pete, and thank you for everybody who's connected in this afternoon, and greetings of the winter solstice to you all, and the first day of winter. And I'm happy to be here, and my title page here gives some acknowledgement to my colleagues at the University of Connecticut who have made some contributions to this effort, and but I'm here to be the one today to talk about it a bit. Credit also goes to folks who have either taken photographs here or who appear in photographs here. At the University of Connecticut, we have an ownership of 2,100 acres of forest land that is assembled in a variety of various size parcels in the Yukon campus area. And the management of that land falls to the Department of Natural Resources and the Environment, where I have a joint appointment. And so many of the management issues that we face at Yukon are identical to the management issues faced by property owners in the Northeast, whether they own 10 acres of land or whether they own 400 acres of land. And so much of the work that we do try to accomplish at Yukon is done with student labor and small equipment, and as resources become available, we sell wood, we sell logs, we sell lumber, and it's a self-supporting operation. So we've learned a lot over time, and some of this information comes from simply that experience. We've also had the opportunity to work with a variety of supporters and sponsors on other projects like the roadside forest management that Pete mentioned earlier, where we've put some of these techniques to work. And I want to give some thanks to folks who have either participated in or sponsored some of that work as well. In Connecticut, we have a number of issues or transitions, or how do you want to put this, dynamics that are taking place with respect to woodlands and woodland ownership, and which stimulates thinking about alternative ways of approaching forest management. Personally, my wife and I, we own 16 acres of land, and we manage it for a variety of purposes. That includes our annual supply of firewood, and some logs, and lots of recreational uses and wildlife habitat and so forth and so on. And really our priorities are our privacy and aesthetics and recreation and the family use of the property and so forth and so on. And while we do harvest some trees and we do use some wood, it's not the highest priority that we have. And so the management that I do very often involves very small acreage at any particular time. A few trees here and there, a half an acre here or there, and I find that in talking with landowners around the state that many folks who enjoy working on their own land, that's the scale where they work as well. The other thing that's going on in Connecticut is that while woodland kind of stays intact and we still have lots of forest in the state of Connecticut, for those of you who don't know the statistics, we estimate that 75% of the land area of Connecticut is under a tree canopy, and 60% of the land area of the state of Connecticut is considered to be woodland or forest land. There's also a tree canopy in suburban areas and urban areas as well. But while we have quite a bit of forest land, the forest land itself is divided into ever decreasing parcel sizes. You know, something that used to be 120 acres is now, three 40-acre parcels. Or what used to be 40 acres is now 4 10-acre parcels. And, the forest is still there, the habitat is still there, but the ownership challenges are different from what they used to be. And as we mentioned earlier, a lot of the roadside forest management research and demonstration that we're trying to conduct as a result of storm issues in Connecticut does involve small acres of land. If I have a 400-foot stretch of road, that's got a history of outage problems and so forth and so on, and I impose a management regime there that's 100 feet deep from the road, I'm only talking about an acre of land. And so this is not something that is particularly suitable for the conventional way of doing forest management at the larger scale. Over the years, the timber industry and forest management on larger acreages have gotten better over time. The machinery is getting larger. They do these jobs with lots less impact and much more efficiently, and move tremendous volumes of wood in some places, and they do this very well. But this sort of scale of operation is suitable for 50 acres at a time or 100 acres at a time, and isn't going to be suitable for me on my little 16-acre parcel, or for somebody who only owns 8 or 9 acres. And but I have found for people who do work on their own land, what works well on 5 acres of land is going to work just as well on 5 of 50 acres of land, if you're only doing a small project at a time. So as we look into these questions, we recognize that there are some alternatives available in terms of tools and equipment and techniques to address a lot of these small management needs. And so the questions that I, as the extension forester, want to explore are really what skills are required. What are the capabilities of some of these small scale options, and what are the costs associated with them? And as much as what the capabilities are, we want to know what are their limitations, and so that we don't try to talk people into trying something that really should be something else. So we'll begin talking about skills. And if you're going to work with trees, you're going to do management on your woodlot. If you're in the Northeast, it's generally a matter of having trees that need to be removed. The forest tends to grow in an overstock condition, and you want to thin it down, or you want to remove diseased trees, or you want to create a habitat feature, or you want to harvest some material for your own use. Why, it involves using a chainsaw, and that's the tool that's the most useful tool probably that's ever been designed for the purpose that it's used for. And but it's important to recognize that you don't just pick up your saw and go out in the woods and hope for the best. There are some things you can learn about using a chainsaw that will enhance your capabilities and also enhance your safety. And to that end, I acknowledge my colleague J.P. Barsky at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station, who has conceived of this acronym on the word YES, and he uses those letters to remind himself every day about yourself, your equipment, and your surroundings. If you look look at the first one and you ask for yourself, are you up to the task? Have you had a good breakfast? You're going to be out there with a cutting tool. You want to make sure you're not angry at the world, that you're well rested and that you're not fatigued in some way. Do you have the proper personal protective equipment? There are safety checks you can do on your equipment to make sure it's maintained in good working order. Make sure that there's no leaking tanks of oil or fuel and breaks in the framing or in the wiring or whatever the case may be. Are you using the right equipment for the job? And a key piece of equipment necessary is having a first aid kit that's available and accessible. If you hurt yourself in the woods, it's not good enough to have your first aid kit behind the back seat of the pickup truck. You want to have it with you. You want to have it accessible. And then looking at your surroundings to remember every day to address and recognize what hazards might be out there to affect the safety of your working environment. Are the weather conditions appropriate? Do you have all the preparations you need for an emergency? As we talk about chainsaws, there's 5, and as I talk about safety, I tend to group things in groups of 5. If you remember that there's always 5 things to remember, why it's helpful. And we look at making sure a person has good stout leather boots, preferably with steel toes, that you have cutting protection in the leg area, either chaps or chainsaw pants. A helmet is key for the flying debris that might be coming down from the canopy as a tree moves through the canopy as it's being felled. If a whole tree falls on your head, it's not going to do you much good. But a 2-foot piece of wood that's falling from 80 feet and hits you on the head would be the same as a professional baseball player swinging his bat at your head. It might knock you down if you're wearing a hard hat, but at least you'll get up and you'll be able to talk about it. Hearing protection helps me all the time keep from getting fatigued. It protects the ears certainly from damaging frequencies and loudness. And but I also find that it's less fatiguing not to have a loud noise around. And then, of course, eye protection. You're going to be making chips. There's going to be flying, debris, and either safety glasses or a helmet, face mask, or both together is something you want to make sure you have. When we look at our equipment with the chainsaw, there's a safety check you can do every day to make sure that the key safety items are in place. Your chain brake, making sure your spark arrestor is functional on your muffler, that the throttle lock is functional so the engine doesn't rev when you don't want it to, and the chain catch is in place for the rare occurrence where the chain hops off the bar, and then check into just the overall appearance of the saw to make sure that there's no broken mounts and there's no cracks in the housing or anything like that. Let me pause for a minute and mention that you will see in these photographs various products. That doesn't imply any endorsement here. The photographs just happen to be as I'm able to get them, and it happens to be whatever tool they pick up. Doesn't mean that I'm endorsing one brand over another in any way most of the time. The one endorsement that I will make at this point, for those of you for whom this information sounds familiar, a lot of this quick overview comes straight out of the Game of Logging Level 1 class, chainsaw safety class, that's taught under the Game of Logging program. And if you're interested in using a chainsaw, the Game of Logging program is well worthwhile, and it's the one thing I endorse very highly. And these photographs and this commentary does not substitute for taking the all-day class, just to be sure that you understand that. When we walk into an area to make sure it's safe, we want to check for overhead hazards, potential tripping hazards right in the area. We have to decide where our tree is going to land when we do cut it, and have a direction of fall already figured out, or a target that you're sort of aiming for when the tree falls, so that once you have decided on a direction of fall, you can then do an appropriate lean assessment on the tree to make sure that you make your cuts properly. Once you've also decided on a direction of fall, you can then figure out what your escape route is going to be. So if this tree here that we're going to cut is going to fall away from us in the picture, directly away, then our escape route wants to be at a 45-degree angle back from the direction of fall. Most injuries in chainsaw work come from things that happen within 6 feet of the stump, and from the trunk bouncing around or sliding back, or sliding sideways or something like that. And you want to make sure that you get at least 15 or 20 feet away at a 45-degree angle back from the stump as soon as that tree starts to move. And before you release that tree, cut it so it starts to fall, you always want to look up, make sure there's nobody out there. I know this has happened to me. It's happened to many people where they're about to cut the tree and they look up and they have a spectator out there that they didn't expect to see. Many of you might have heard of directional felling techniques. It's a geometrical science that in a physical technique that you can learn to learn how to control the fall of trees. So you can, in terms of the direction that you're going to go, maintain control while the tree is in the process of falling. You can use these techniques to have trees fall against their natural lean. And I use or I've learned from the game of logging class, a 70-80-10 rule, where my first cut, my face cut, my notch, if you will, is made at 70 degrees. And the reason we open it up that much is because I want to have those fibers at the base of my hinge in control of the drop almost all the way to the ground. If I were to cut it more shallow, this surface would come out against this surface, and the hinge would break off. And so by opening it up a little bit more, we're keeping our hinge in control. These are general guidelines for normal trees of reasonable size, and no problems of like rot or anything like that in the stump, no excessive lean or anything like that. There are more advanced techniques for when you have problem trees. That's for a more advanced class. People often ask me, well, how deep do you go with your notch? Well, it's not a matter of how deep. It's a matter of cutting down at 70 degrees until you reach a point where the length of your hinge is going to be at least 80% of the DBH. And that means if you have a 10-inch tree, the length of this hinge should be at least 8 inches. And if you're cutting low on the stump, like this photograph shows, that's easy to do because of the root flare. And then we use a plunge cutting technique that where we start the saw into the wood behind where we want our hinge to be, and we push the saw right straight through. We leave some holding wood in the back. We move the saw towards the hinge until we have a thickness on our hinge that's at least 10% of the DBH. So on that 10-inch tree, once again, I want 1 inch of thickness on my hinge. And I can do all of that work. And I have my hinge holding, and I have wood in the back holding. That tree's not going to go anywhere until my hinge is properly made, at which point then I can look up. I can set wedges if I need to, and finish the cut by cutting that holding wood. And that whole process involves another 5 points of felling plan that you can learn. But it's essentially having done a forward and back and lean assessment and a side lean assessment, and having determined your hinge dimensions, you can aim your notch accordingly to counteract the side lean to make sure the tree goes on to target. And you can you can come up with a wedge plan to counteract any back lean that you might run into. So in this case here, the cutter has pushed the saw through the tree. He's made his hinge, and he's left some holding wood back here. He sets wedges into that cut, pulls the saw out of the cut, sets wedges into the cut to hold that tree in place. And then when he cuts that wood that's in the back, that tree's not going to set down on his saw by mistake. It's going to set on the wedge, and he can use the wedge to actually drive the wedge in, use an axe to drive the wedge in a little deeper and lever the tree over if it's got any back lean or if it's standing straight up. So there's some techniques you can learn. I highly recommend you take the game of logging class. This is a kind of an extreme example from one of our roadside forest management activities. We were trying to get the tree crews to learn how to drop the entire trunk of the tree so we could assess it for potential products. Normally what they'll do is they'll top the tree and then they'll take it down in chunks. And that's certainly a safe way to do things from the tree crew standpoint, but it kind of negates the ability to recover any value from a log standpoint. So I was trying to demonstrate for them how you could take a tree with some severe lean like this one that's leaning out over the road, and if you aim your opening notch correctly, if there's 8 feet of lean over here, I want to aim at 8 feet away from where I want it to drop. And so I actually aimed my notch over here, and when the tree fell, the lean kind of brought it back to where my target is. But I was able to do that with a plunge cut, a substantial holding wood, and setting just this one wedge on the roadside to make that tree fall where I wanted it to go. Now this tree would be one, if the crown was still on it, if it was twice as tall as it is, this would be one with excessive lean, and you'd use a different type of technique out in the woods. But since the top had been taken out of it, it was one we were able to get a good photograph of for whatever purpose. Moving on to other equipment beyond the chainsaw, once the trees are on the ground, the timber industry uses forwarders and skidders and that sort of thing to move large volumes of wood around. And when you imagine the investment you have to make in a large piece of logging equipment, then it's necessary for those operations to be high volume, high speed, high capacity. Whereas on your woodlot at home, it might be a small volume of wood you're dealing with, but you still want to be able to recover it for whatever purpose. So we looked at a couple of different combinations of low impact, small scale equipment. Pictured here, a tractor. This is a 30-horse four-wheel drive New Holland tractor with a logging winch mounted on the 3-point hitch. And then we also looked at an RTV, a four-wheel drive John Deere Gator with rollover protection, and teamed that with a combination of various logging arches for moving wood out of the woods. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. The RTV and arch combination is a versatile combination. It provides a variety of capabilities, in terms of being able to haul people and haul gear around. You can combine it with the arch in a variety of different ways. In this case, we have the arch with a plain tongue attached to a D-ring type of hitch right on the back, very simply, and it gets the wood off the ground and doesn't take a whole lot of horsepower to be able to to pull these logs once the one end of them is off the ground. The tractor mounted winch is one that has a little more capability in terms of volume at a time. Once again, it's the whole idea is to get one end of the log off the ground to reduce the friction, but you have a little bit more horsepower. And you have a remote capability in terms of the having a cable that you can run out some distance to pick up the wood and drag it over to where the tractor sits. You don't have to back right up to the piece of wood that you're moving. The arches are quite versatile. Going back to these, this combination again, these particular arches are made by a company in Connecticut called Logrite, and you can go to logrite.com and see all their products. They're right in Vernon, Connecticut. I mentioned that because it's an American-made product for those of you who that's important, you know, it's a manufacturing facility right in Vernon, Connecticut, but they ship these things all over the world. And they are quite versatile. They make a variety of sizes. And you see in these photographs a capability where we have a trailer tongue, and this is attached to a standard trailer hitch on the back of the RTV. And then there's a hand crank winch with a cable. The young man is setting a choker with a cable and a hand winch, and will be able to winch the log into where the arch is. In the right-hand picture is an arch set up to be used by hand. There's a log tongue attachment here that has been substituted. The trailer tongue has been removed, and a handle put on there for a person to be able to use it manually. And this becomes very handy for moving logs around when we're you know, like in the sawmill yard or something like that. The next slide is a little video of a fellow doing just that, and so you get a picture of it. We'll see. Hopefully it won't take too long to load, and hopefully you'll be able to hear the sound. If not, why, let me know. So Mike has taken a good sized hickory log and moved it into position where a chunk can be taken off of it to be used for firewood, and the other piece rolled aside for a small saw log, and easy to do on level ground. Understand that it's all about mass. Mike would not be able to pull this uphill by himself, but on level ground, it's a handy way to move wood around. In this next photograph, we have a small hitch of firewood, and the fellows will come up to the firewood with the RTV and the arch. They'll have to position the arch over the wood to attach a chain to it manually, and then attach it back to the RTV to take it down to the landing. They'll back it in there, they'll drive it in there, and then they'll detach the arch, position it over the wood, attach a chain to the wood, chain it up to the arch, and as you see here, and then they head off down the trail. The series of photographs that transition here are intended to show you don't need a terrible large amount of space for that arrangement of equipment to move through the wood, and it's a very low impact. It's kind of labor intensive, and it's a little bit slow, and but it is an effective way of moving some wood around, and it is a way that you can do so in kind of a low impact manner. These two photographs show the cable arrangement. In the first case, we just used the tongue of the arch and tipped it up to attach a chain to the wood, and then pulled down on the tongue and just used the leverage to get the wood off the ground. In this case, they're using the hand winch and the cable arrangement to set the choker and to bring these logs together and get them up off the ground. The cable choker, you can see here, the hand winch is mounted right on the arch itself, and the next series of photographs is simply to illustrate that, well, okay, now he's going to crank, and he's going to crank some more, and you're going to crank some more, and he's going to crank some more, and it takes a little time to get all this done. But there's three very nice 16-foot red pine logs behind this this small machine that they'll be able to take down that trail and put in position for further processing. This is a little video showing the actual cranking with the smaller arch. It's work. Now, notice here on the arch, there's a where the log tongs were attached before, we've taken the tongs off and we've put this other attachment, which is a little grab hook. And what he can do is he can crank this up a little bit more, a little higher, get the end of this piece of firewood off the ground, and then attach a chain to it, wrap a chain around the log, and drop the chain through the slip hook there, and then release the tension on the cable, so as they go down the trail, they're not putting an undue amount of stress on this little pulley. Once again, very effective, clever way to do things at a small volume and a kind of a slow pace. But there they go with the solid chain lock. So in these cases, we're moving small amounts of wood to a centralized location, a landing, if you will, for further processing. In this case, it was with a portable sawmill, but if you can move small quantities of wood in truckload quantities of logs, you can generally find buyers who are willing to come out to buy a whole truckload of logs. You can get those small projects done. The timber industry tends to be very, how do I want to say, they don't want to come out and buy just one or two logs from one or two trees that get cut down. But if you can put a truckload together, you can generally find a market for that quantity of wood. And it, you're talking about between 3,000 and 4,000 board feet worth of logs, and you can get that project done. Another alternative like this one would be to do some value-added processing right on site. These red pine logs were processed on a portable mill into dimension lumber 2x6s and 2x8s for a local outbuilding project. That outbuilding right now is holding up solar panels for the customer, and was a very nice project to get done. All the oak was processed into, once again, dimension lumber for picnic tables. So there was a good use that this material was put to. I just wanted to point out with these arches, you have a couple of options. In this photograph here, notice how we're picking that log right up at the center. And if you find the balance point, you can get that log right off the ground entirely and move it around. You saw that Mike did that with that hickory log. If you pick it at one end or the other, you'll have one end on the ground with some drag. Now, if you're combining the arch with an RTV and you're headed on a downhill skid, this is going to create a problem for you. The brake system in the RTV is designed to hold back the RTV going downhill. This is a lot of mass for that brake system to try to hold back. And so I would clearly caution people, as tempting as it is to lift that log off the ground and go off with it, you don't want to have this kind of mass pushing your little tiny vehicle downhill. You'll lose control very quickly. And so, we advise that you instead pick it up in such a way that one end drags, and you know, if you have to slow down or stop or something, the drag is going to help you with that. And while it does create a little bit more impact with respect to the soil and the surface of your trail, it's minimal because that that other end of the log is off the ground. Just a, you know, a piece of safety advice, just a practical, common sense thing. We want to move on and talk now about the tractor and the arch. In some of our experience with that, we find that if we're recovering saw logs, either for sale roadside or for further processing, this is an effective tool for doing that. I generally don't, with my student crew, drag whole trees with this rig. We cut the logs out, we drag them, you know, 1 or 2 logs at a time, and go back for the rest of the tree that would be firewood later on, and you know, as a second skid to a second pile of wood. And so we don't overtax the equipment, and it makes it a little bit easier to maneuver, and makes it a little bit less impact with respect to the you know, the residual standing trees. If we were dragging the whole tree through, you know, through this site, she would not be able to make this turn without barking this tree up pretty severely. The arches, I mean, the winch is capable of you know, pulling and lifting quite a sizable quantity, and the tractor certainly has the horsepower to support the winch. One thing I would counsel very strongly is while the pulley that you run this cable through, it's not really visible in this photograph, but there is a pulley when you're actually pulling the logs in. You'll see it in a video later on. It pivots back and forth and allows you to go out at a little bit of an angle. You want to be very careful not to go out at too severe an angle. If you pull sideways with this winch and the power this tractor has, the fact that it's a small tractor that's kind of narrow, you could tip that tractor over very easily. So you want to make sure that you're working almost directly behind the tractor and not side to side with the winch, because you know, you don't want to have a nasty surprise. Here's a video of the winch working. He'll detach the chains and hook them to a place on the frame of the winch. So that he's not actually skidding with the cable. And when he lifts the winch off the ground with the 3-point hitch, the idea is to get the logs off the ground. He's just barely doing that in this video. Good teachable moment. We should have brought those logs in a little bit closer and you know, choke them up onto the frame a little bit tighter there to get them a little further off the ground. But you get the idea. The tractor has some additional capabilities. You know, if you get it set up with forks and so forth and so on, you can do a little bit of sorting. You can do a little bit of piling. You know, these logs are just being piled roadside for you know, for sale roadside, and you know, it makes for keeping the landing area nice and tidy. When we look at the costs, if we find that we can look at a range of costs for all of this equipment. Certainly there's used tractors on the market. There might be used winches out there, and used ATVs or RTVs, as the case may be, and you know, in a range of prices. But you know, to buy a new tractor and a new winch, you're you're looking at somewhere close to a $30,000 price tag. And the RTV with the arch combination, you're about two-thirds of that price. And for those of you who are interested in the commercial capabilities of that, those combinations, why, you're looking at a pickup truck payment there, and you compare that to the $250,000 that you might have to invest in high speed, high production logging equipment. You don't have to move near as much wood to make that payment, and so it might open up an economic opportunity for somebody who's who's entrepreneurial to perhaps take on some of these small jobs as well, on a contractual basis. We looked at pros and cons, and the combinations of the two. Certainly the RTV and arch combination is a much lower capacity combination. The tractor and winch can pull at least twice as much wood. If you want to transport these pieces of equipment around to different sites, you need a light duty trailer for the RTV, but you would need to have a heavy duty trailer for the tractor and winch combination. We did talk about the cost already. Travel time, when I'm talking about travel time, I'm talking about actually skidding your load to the landing, from the stump to the landing. Once you've got your logs all connected up, all choked up and winched into place, the travel time is about equal. They travel at about the same speed, and actual skid time is going to be a factor of how far away you are from your landing site. But the positioning and the hookup for the RTV is much slower. It took on the average about 3 times as long to get the hitch hitched up with the RTV and arch than it was with the tractor. With the tractor, you set the tractor, you put on your choker chains, you run your cable out there, and boom, you zip it into place. Whereas there's an awful lot of positioning that needs to be done with the RTV and the arch. Very effective once it's in place, but it's a little fussier to do. And I don't actually have production numbers, how many board feet can you skid in a day and all of that kind of thing. And the reason for that is because I'm always working with the student crew, and they're in a learning mode as well as in a production mode at the time we're doing these projects. And so any production numbers that I might have in terms of board feet per day or board feet per hour or something like that would not necessarily be realistic, mainly because a lot of times there's a lot of talk time in between, about various things from safety to technique. A little further look at pros and cons. The RTV is a very multi-purpose piece of equipment. You can use it for lots of other things than moving wood around in the woods. If you're a hunter, if you're a fisherman, if you're a gardener, you have other maintenance things to do on your property, you can get a lot of use out of your RTV. The arch is multi-purpose in that it can be used in a variety of different ways, whether it's at the sawmill landing, or whether it's positioning logs for sorting, or or for chunking into firewood. Fine. Same with a tractor. Very versatile piece of equipment, especially if you have attachments for doing a variety of property ownership tasks. The winch, the 3-point hitch mounted winch, is designed for one purpose, and that's for winching and skidding logs, and that's really all you're going to use it for. And we have at times combined the tractor 3-point hitch mounted winch with the arch to pull a really big piece of wood, or to be able to and I wish I had a video of this, but I don't. But we've chained to the arch to a tree that was hung up, and moved off at some distance, and put a cable on the tongue of the arch, and used the arch to pull down a tree that was hung up, and not have to be anywhere near it when we drag it out of a tree. It's a pretty slick way to do things. And in terms of ease of use, the RTV is a very easy piece of equipment to operate. You get in, you start it, you step on the throttle, and off you go. The arch is easy to use as a hand tool. It's a little fussier to use in combination with a piece of towing equipment because of the you have to maneuver it into place. You have to position your cable and crank your winch and or attach it again to the RTV or whatever you're using to pull it with, and so it's a little more difficult to use from a time standpoint. It's not hard, it's not complicated, but it's just a little more time consuming. Terrain is something to give some thought to. Steepness of terrain is a factor, for the tractor more of a problem than for the RTV. With it, to a point, to a reasonable slope, RTV will negotiate a reasonable slope fairly well. And I just would remind you once again if you're going downhill with a load, drag the load. The tractor is a little, this particular tractor we have, because it is narrow, it's a little top heavy. We're very wary about operating it on a slope, either straight up and down or not at all. And even going downhill with a four-wheel drive tractor that's not articulated, can be a thing you want to give some thoughts to. So it does have limitations in that way. Certainly obstructions in the trail are going to be a problem for the RTV, less so with the tractor. And once again, to a point, you want to keep your stumps low so that you don't hang things up or fetch things up against the stump. You want to choose trails where you can clear rocks and other obstructions out of the way. In terms of proximity to the work you're going to do, you have to get close with the RTV and the arch in order to pick up your load and move on with it. You can be a cable length away with the tractor and winch your load over to you before you lift it off the ground, and so that's an advantage to doing things that way. And so that's pretty much what I have to share with you today. And I thank you very much for your time and your attention and for showing up. And I'd be delighted to try to entertain any questions that might be out there.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and it covered, I think it covered a lot of the details. There's obviously no substitution for getting out and getting your hands dirty, and you've provided the framework I think that people can use to do that. There are a few questions, and this is the point in time if people have questions to add in. Tom, if you want, you can maybe stop sharing your screen, and then I think you'll be able to see the chat window as well.
Okay, I see the chat window now, yes.
And let's see, how do we scroll backwards? So I'll scroll backwards and you can, let me see here. All right, so there was early on, when you were talking about the personal protective equipment, there was an additional suggestion about the use of gloves, and I know some of the manufacturers make gloves that have the Kevlar resistant material that covers the back of the hand in case you have a chain that breaks or comes off the end of the bar and starts flipping around, and that provides some protection to your hands.
Gloves have become quite advanced, and some of them are very light, and some of them are are built the protective material, like Pete said. You can also buy a vest that's built the same way your chaps are, and for that kickback occurrence. What I was showing you was the bare minimum of things, and I certainly use gloves sometimes, and sometimes I don't. But I came home one day after cutting firewood, and there was a nick in my chaps. And I thought to myself, when did I get that close to my leg with a moving chain? And from that day forward, I have never started my chainsaw without having my chaps on. And I have another story, if you don't mind. A friend of mine was having some tree work done near his house, and this happened to be an arborist and not a someone from the wood products industry. But the arborist was fully dressed with protective equipment, pants, vest, gloves, hard hat system, and my friend happened to ask, well, I was thinking of getting my own chainsaw. What would you recommend? And the first thing out of the guy's mouth was, the first thing, if you're going to operate a chainsaw, you need to invest in is all this personal protective equipment. And my friend asked him, well, if I'm only going to use the chainsaw once or twice a year, why would I want to go to all that extra expense? And the fellow stood there and said to him, I do this every single day, and I am considered to be an expert at what I do. I'm an expert at the chainsaw. I know exactly what its capabilities are. I know exactly how to take the tree down, and I wouldn't dream of doing it without my personal protective equipment. You stand there and you tell me you have no experience, you don't have any expertise at using a chainsaw, and you're not going to protect yourself. So, that that hit home with me, and I thought that was a great response, and makes a good argument for whatever personal protection you should have. And gloves are a good idea as well. Once again, I was just showing you the bare minimum. I like to think of things in groups of 5.
So, are you there, Tom?
Yep.
Okay. I didn't know if that was the end of the sentence or,
yeah, sorry.
or if we lost audio.
Yeah.
So I'm with you absolutely on the use of personal protective equipment. When I've done chainsaw safety discussions or we've hosted events and we've demonstrated directional felling, the point that I make is that you can acquire all of the personal protective equipment, the helmet. Most people are going to have boots already, but so the helmet that includes the face and eye protection, the hearing protection, and some kind of cut resistant either chaps or pants, you're looking at maybe $200. And so it's a really inexpensive way to protect yourself. And if you weigh that against the cost of a single trip to the emergency room, hopefully you have insurance, which covers most of it, but even the insurance room, the copay is going to cost you something, and then the downtime is going to cost you even more. So that's there's absolutely no reason not to use personal protective equipment when you're running a chainsaw.
Absolutely, and a chainsaw injury is a life-changing experience. It's not like you cut your thumb with a knife cutting a bagel. It's
right. Yeah, right. Those are nasty teeth on that chain.
Yeah,
so and to that end, Tom Ward, one of the participants, has shared a couple of YouTube videos about poor chainsaw techniques. I won't play those now, but people can go find those. Carl shared a couple of videos about using small scale equipment for logging. Brendan was commenting about, maybe you could share, Tom, what your experiences were with the arches that you had different widths of tires. Was there any problem with kind of rutting?
The main I had no rutting problems with tires. Where we were getting a rut was repeated use of the same trail dragging a single log, and that single log would make a rut in the middle of the trail. Was an easy thing to fix with some simple water bars at the end of the project, but I had no problems with the tires. The two arches are designed for sort of two different load ranges, if you will. One is for handling bigger logs, and the other one is for actually designed mostly for hand use, but it's an option to be able to hook it up to the machine. And that wider arch is also used quite extensively by arborists who want to minimize damage in formal landscape settings, if across the lawn or something like that. That wide stance and that wide tire spreads the load and doesn't create problems in the grass.
Okay. And then Jared offers a comment just with the panelists, he describes that he's a horse logger, and he points out that for some landowners that the investment, we'll get to some other economics finance questions here in a minute, but he's pointing out that there are people who are commercially available to do this for landowners who don't want to make the investment in buying an RTV or a tractor or an arch or a winch. So those options may exist in some communities.
Yeah.
Carl offers. I'll go ahead.
And I would like to see a greater, entrepreneurship at the small scale. And so hats off to you, Jared, for what you're doing.
Carl offers some suggestions about some other webinar options. So Tom then has a question about the cost of just the winch. And he points out that many farmers, of course, have tractors, and many rural landowners have ATVs or UTVs or RTVs. What about the, just the kind of the business end of that machine, the winch or the arch? What are some ballpark prices that we're looking at?
The winch alone, brand new. This was, and the brand is Wallenstein for no other reason than those are the folks that have the contract with the state of Connecticut. And it's neither the smallest winch nor the largest one. It's one of the middle ones. And the price all set up and ready to go was $4,000. That was delivered to our facility where we could mount it on the tractor and it would be ready to go. So that was the cost of the winch. And the arches range, if my memory serves me well, from the $1,500 range up to the $2,500 range, maybe more, depending on the bells and whistles that you get along with them.
Okay, and I was thinking about the winches, and I had similar sorts of memories of numbers. So, then Tom follows that up, and he wonders if either you or I know, or maybe there are other people who are participating in the webinar, if there's anyone who's using this kind of small scale equipment on a commercial basis and they're hiring out to log small parcels. So I know of a logger in the Lake Placid area who uses, it's a bigger tractor. It's like an 60 to 80 horse four-wheel drive tractor with a farmy winch. So it's a different vendor of winching, but the same principles, primarily to log small parcels. And he says he doesn't do any advertising because he has his workload. He has about 5 years of jobs in front of him. So it's, at least in that community, he's well occupied. So how about in Connecticut? Are you, and I'm sure there are other places in New York, that's just the one that I'm aware of. In Connecticut, is anybody doing this?
Yeah, I know of two operators that one of which has been operating with a tractor and a winch for years and years and years. And along with small scale logging, he also does witch hazel harvesting. And then one fellow who is in the logging business, but also has the capabilities of operating a tractor with a farmy winch. He says if he sold all his other equipment and he just focused on that, he would be busy every day. Just from small operations. He'd be busy. He might not make as much money, but he would be busy every day. And then at Great Mountain Forest, the group there, Jody Bronson and his team have a full range of capabilities like that as well. For small projects, they use their small tractor and farmy winch, and for the larger projects, they have a regular cable skidder. So.
Okay. Tom Ward offers makes the observation that when your tractor rolls over, it can be deadly, and every year
Absolutely.
I hear, there's an extension forester, very unfortunately, in the Northeast several years ago that was killed by a tractor rollover.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the modern tractors have what's called a ROPS, or a ROPS, a rollover protection system. That was evident in the pictures that Tom showed. And there are opportunities to retrofit older tractors with those rollover protection systems. Those of course you have to have your seatbelt on in order for those to do much good for you.
Yeah. Right. And the winches are normally the winch, like the one we showed in these videos, was, as you saw, the operator was on the ground. We was standing on the ground. So this this risk of tipping the tractor over with the winch. Generally, you wouldn't be on the tractor; you'd be on the ground because you're operating the winch from the ground. But and you have to climb back on and off the tractor, so you need to be capable of doing that too. But yeah. The rollover protection is one of those things you want to be very careful you take advantage of if you go out and buy a used piece of equipment. You want to retrofit it if you need to. Carl makes the comment about nicking one's chaps and then perhaps discarding them, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's not like you can put them under the sewing machine and sewing them back together, because then they won't work the way they're supposed to. The fibers are supposed to come out and and jam the saw if it becomes a problem. And if you nick the chaps and you stitch through them, why then the fibers are not going to come out and jam the saw the way they're supposed to. So.
Correct. Okay, so Greg has a question on did you load the tires on the tractor with any kind of substance to give it weight?
Yes, the tires on the tractor are loaded, yes. What is it, calcium chloride or something like that?
Right, okay.
That's in them, yeah.
All right. And then Ralph wants to know if you have any experience with a tracked skid steer.
I do not, but one of our graduate students, their father is in the business, and that's all he uses. So I can't speak to it personally, but I know there are people out there who use this type of equipment.
Okay. I think it says Tim. Any experience with using a trailer to forward wood, with or without a grapple hook, to avoid the damage of skidding? So essentially a forwarder.
Yes. We did have one experience where we had a forwarding trailer come and help us out. It wasn't ours. It was just kind of on a loan basis, and absolutely it reduced the amount of impact. I have known people who have created sort of jury-rigged trailers where they use a PV to get the log onto the trailer, and be able to tow it away. But once again, I would want to counsel you that anybody who's going to use a trailer wants to make sure that they have the braking capabilities with the whatever they're towing the trailer with, because you put 3 or 4 logs on a trailer, that's an awful lot of mass to stop if it's going at any kind of speed. We do have a question here from Gabriel. Mentioned that most of the logs looked in the 10 to 12 inch, 14 inch range or less. Do these systems you show work with larger logs up to 20 inches or so? And yes, the larger arch that you saw in those pictures handles those size logs very easily, and that's about as big as I would want to go with that. And if I had that log in a very, very tough location, to pull it out with the what they call the fetching arch, that larger arch, you would need to have some horsepower like the cable winch to actually pull the arch, out of whatever tight spot you're in before you can drag the log down the road.
Okay, David says that he has some experience as a landowner and always uses PPE, but his directional felling has been a challenge, and he's typically ties things off with a little tension and a come along. Any comments on that technique, or what's your reaction to that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with doing something to make sure that you don't have a hang up or you don't create a problem. It does take time, and that's usually what people are trying to save. A little tension in the right direction, and certainly if you get your rope or whatever high in the tree, you get an awful lot of leverage. We've used ropes ourselves in our roadside work to provide that little bit of extra insurance for trees that have excessive back lean or side lean, to put a little tension in the other direction. So there's nothing wrong with doing it. It's what arborists do it all the time, and I think that you can you can save a lot of headaches that way, even though it does take some time to do. If you haven't had the opportunity to take a game of logging class where you can have the geometry explained to you, and try it out for yourself, I would recommend it. There are times probably you are going to want to use rope, no question about it. But you might save a few hours by learning the other techniques.
Okay. Fred says contractors with small skidders have a cost advantage over those with larger machines that require the lowboy to move them around. Small caber skidders can be moved with a tonner pickup and trailer mobilization costs. So this is looks like a question about mobilization costs and transporting equipment. Or have you looked into those variables?
I haven't looked into those variables formally, but what I hear from people in the industry, that the cost of moving equipment is a major factor in taking on small projects, and not just the production, but the fact that, the production rates that they require, but the fact that you would have to move and then move again so soon after the job was started is generally what makes it cost prohibitive to do that when the equipment is large. So.
Yes. Okay. So looks like there's some other suggestions about some links, and otherwise people are just saying that it's a great job. Jared, points out that the horse loggers again also have, some of them have medium-sized tractors that they use in complement to the horses when they're doing certain jobs, which seems to make sense. I mean, if you have, you could do some pretty neat work with horse logging, but then there are occasions when you want that mechanization and you have that opportunity to do it.
And a lot of times, if you're doing this work sort of part-time in the off season, you have a farming or other agricultural operation that you use the same equipment or same horses for. Why people will have those capabilities available to them, no question about it.
Yep. So Todd asks if we've seen any of the mini skidders that are available, and what we think of those. And I'm going to type in a link. We have a social media site where we've collected pictures of these small scale logging solutions that some people have come up with, and there are some of those small skidders. But maybe Tom, you have any, and so he clarifies that the track skidders are the Vimics that are available. I think Scandinavian made. So I'll type in the link, and Tom, you can share anything that you want about that idea.
Well, I have seen some of them. I haven't had the opportunity to work with any of them, and I know that they're out there. And I think the whole purpose of this investigation and this conversation and this, these types of presentations are to bring these capabilities to the attention of landowners, to land managers, to potential entrepreneurs that you decide to go into the woods business. You don't necessarily have to undertake a commercial logging at the high production scale. There are alternatives out there, and I'm seeing a growing demand with small lots and small projects for people asking, who can we get to do this work? Somebody writes a little project into a management plan. Well, who can we get to help us with that? I think that people with the right combination of equipment will be able to find plenty of work once they get their name out there.
Yeah, I just did a little inquiry for the parcel sizes in New York, and now I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it seems to me that something like a very large percentage, maybe 80% of the people own parcels that are less than 50 acres or maybe even smaller. So if you have a 10-acre parcel or a 20-acre parcel, it's just not going to be feasible to have a commercial size skidder show up. And so the small scale options that you're showing, Tom, would work. Maybe some of those track skidders with forwarders like the Vemix that Todd was referencing would work in some situations. But it seems like as parcel sizes change, then the scale of operability is going to have to change at the same time.
Certainly.
So, well, I think so. There's one other comment about the making these slides available for review. This presentation was recorded and will be posted on the Forest Connect YouTube channel, so you can check it out there. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Tom for his presentation. Tom will be back again tonight at 7 p.m. And so you all are welcome to come back if you want to see the presentation again. My guess is it's going to be very similar to what you saw at noon, but still, you always pick up something good the second time around as well. But thank you, Tom, and thank you to the participants. And I'm going to stop the recording, and Tom will, I'll see you back here about 10 till 7 tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for your comments and your questions. And